The courtroom smelled like old wood and stale coffee. I sat there, my hands trembling in my lap, staring at the polished table in front of me. Outside, the Seattle rain hammered against the tall windows, creating a steady rhythm that somehow matched the pounding in my chest. It was early November, and the gray sky seemed to press down on the city, making everything feel heavier, darker, more final. I could feel his eyes on me from across the room. 15 years of marriage, and now we sat on opposite sides of a courtroom, strangers with lawyers between us. My attorney, Patricia Monroe, a sharp woman in her mid-50s with steel gray hair and kind eyes, leaned over and whispered something about staying calm, about not reacting no matter what was said. I nodded, but I wasn't sure I could keep that promise. The judge, an older man with deep lines etched into his face, shuffled through papers on his bench. Judge Harrison had seen countless divorces in his career. I was just another case number to him, another couple who couldn't make it work. But to me, this was everything. This was my life shattering into pieces in front of a room full of strangers. I glanced back at the gallery behind us. My daughter, Claire, sat in the third row. She was 17, with my dark curly hair and her father's intense green eyes. She wore a navy blue sweater that I had bought her last Christmas, and her face was pale, set in an expression I couldn't quite read. Next to her sat my sister, Beth, whose presence had been my only source of comfort these past 6 months. When I looked forward again, I caught sight of him, Mitchell, the man I had loved since I was 23 years old, the man who had promised me forever on a beach in California, with the sunset painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Now he sat rigid in his chair, his jaw clenched, his expensive suit perfectly pressed. Next to him, his attorney, a younger man with slicked back hair and an expression that suggested he enjoyed these battles, whispered something that made Mitchell nod. The hearing had already been going on for 40 minutes. We had covered the division of assets, the house on Maple Street that we had bought when Claire was just a baby, the savings accounts, the retirement funds. Everything we had built together was being torn apart, assigned value, divided up like we were liquidating a failed business rather than ending a family. Patricia stood up when the judge called on her. She presented our case calmly, professionally. She talked about my contributions to the marriage, the years I had spent as a stay-at-home mother, the part-time work I had done from home to help with expenses while still being there for Claire. She mentioned how I had put my career on hold, how I had supported Mitchell's rise in his tech company, how I had been the one to manage our home, our family, our life. I remembered those years, clearly. The early mornings packing lunches, the school pickups, the late nights waiting up when Mitchell worked past midnight on projects that would eventually make him a senior director. I remembered the dinner parties I hosted for his colleagues, the networking events where I smiled and made small talk while wearing dresses I couldn't really afford. I remembered being proud of him, of US, of what we were building together. Then Patricia mentioned the affair. The word hung in the air like a dark cloud. Mitchell's attorney objected immediately, arguing that fault wasn't relevant in Washington state's no-fault divorce laws. The judge sustained it, but the damage was done. Everyone in that room knew why we were really here. I had found out about her 6 months ago. Vanessa, a 29-year-old marketing associate at his company. I had suspected something for weeks before I finally looked at his phone one night when he fell asleep on the couch. The messages were explicit, detailed, ongoing. They had been seeing each other for over a year. While I was home helping Claire study for her SATs, while I was cooking dinners that often went cold waiting for him, while I was believing his excuses about late meetings and weekend work trips, he was with her. The confrontation had been ugly. He denied it at first, then minimized it, then finally admitted it with a coldness that shocked me more than the betrayal itself. He said he had fallen out of love with me years ago. He said I had let myself go, that I was boring, that I didn't understand his world anymore. He said he had stayed for Claire, but now that she was almost grown, there was no point in pretending anymore. I had asked him to leave that same night. He did, without much argument, moving into a downtown apartment that probably cost 3 times our mortgage. Claire had been devastated. She had always been a daddy's girl, had always looked up to him with such admiration. Watching that relationship crack and splinter had been almost as painful as my own heartbreak. Now Mitchell's attorney stood up. His name was Gordon Wells, and he had a reputation for being ruthless in divorce proceedings. He approached the judge with a folder full of documents, his voice smooth and confident. He talked about Mitchell's income, his financial contributions, his role as the primary breadwinner. He made it sound like I had been living off Mitchell's success, like I had been some sort of freeloader rather than a partner. Then Gordon started talking about what I deserved in the settlement. He argued that since I hadn't worked full-time in years, since I didn't have significant income, since the house and savings were primarily funded by Mitchell's salary, I should receive only minimal spousal support and a small portion of the assets. He suggested I get a job, rebuild my career, support myself like any capable adult should. I felt my face flush with anger and humiliation. Patricia squeezed my arm gently, reminding me without words to stay composed. But it was hard. It was so hard to sit there and listen to my life being reduced to numbers and percentages, to hear myself being portrayed as some kind of opportunist. The judge asked Mitchell if he wanted to make a statement. Mitchell stood up, straightening his tie. Even now, even after everything, part of me noticed how handsome he still was, how he carried himself with that confidence that had first attracted me to him all those years ago. But there was something different in his face now, something hard and cold that I didn't recognize. He cleared his throat and looked directly at the judge, carefully avoiding my eyes. His voice was steady, businesslike, as if he were giving a presentation at work rather than talking about the end of our marriage. He talked about his career, his responsibilities, his financial obligations. He mentioned Claire, saying he wanted to ensure her college education was fully funded, that she would be taken care of. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. He gestured toward me without looking at me and said, almost dismissively, "Your Honor, I've worked extremely hard to build my career and provide for my family. My wife chose to stay home. That was her choice. I supported that choice financially for years. But now, she expects to be rewarded for that choice at my expense. With all due respect, I don't believe she deserves anything beyond minimal support. She's only 40 years old. She's perfectly capable of working and supporting herself." The words hit me like physical blows. She doesn't deserve anything. I heard Beth gasp behind me, heard Patricia's sharp intake of breath next to me. But what broke me was hearing Claire's voice, small and shocked, whisper, "Dad," from the back of the courtroom. I stared at Mitchell, waiting for him to take it back, to show some sign of remorse or recognition of how cruel those words were. But he just stood there, his face impassive, as if he had simply stated a fact rather than dismissed 15 years of partnership, of sacrifice, of love. Gordon continued, elaborating on Mitchell's point. He suggested a modest spousal support payment for only 2 years, just enough time for me to get back on my feet. He argued that I should receive only 20% of the marital assets, given that Mitchell had been the primary earner. He painted a picture of me as someone who had made easy choices and now wanted to cash in on someone else's hard work. I wanted to scream. I wanted to stand up and remind everyone that I had worked too, that managing a home, raising a child, supporting a spouse's career was work, that the years I had spent being available, being flexible, being the stable foundation that allowed Mitchell to focus on his climbing corporate ladder had value, that I had given up job opportunities, promotions, my own ambitions, because we had agreed it was best for our family. But I sat there, silent, feeling smaller and smaller with each word that was spoken. I felt erased, invisible, reduced to nothing more than an inconvenient expense in Mitchell's life. Patricia stood up to respond, her voice tight with controlled anger. She began to present evidence of my contributions, bank statements showing the part-time income one had brought in, testimonials about the volunteer work I had done at Claire's school, records of a household management that had freed Mitchell to work his 60 and 70-hour weeks. But I barely heard her. All I could hear were those words echoing in my head. She doesn't deserve anything. After everything we had been through together, after building a life, a home, a family, that was what I had become to him. Nothing. Someone who deserved nothing. I felt tears threatening to spill over, but I blinked them back furiously. I would not cry in front of him. I would not give him the satisfaction of seeing me break. I had already cried enough at home, alone in the bedroom we used to share, surrounded by half-empty boxes and the ghost of a marriage that no longer existed. The judge was speaking now, asking questions, requesting clarification on certain points. Patricia was answering, firm and professional, fighting for me in ways I no longer had the strength to fight for myself. The rain outside seemed to intensify, the sound almost deafening against the windows. I glanced back at Claire again. Her face had changed. The unreadable expression was gone, replaced by something I had never seen before. Her jaw was set, her eyes bright with tears, but also with something else. Anger, determination. She was staring at her father with a look that was equal parts hurt and fury. As Patricia finished her response and sat down, there was a moment of silence in the courtroom. The judge was writing notes, preparing to continue with the proceedings. Mitchell's attorney was shuffling papers, looking satisfied. Mitchell himself was leaning back in his chair, his posture relaxed, as if he had already won. That was when I heard it, the sound of a chair scraping against the floor in the gallery. I turned, along with everyone else in the courtroom, to see Claire standing up. Her hands were clenched at her sides, her face flushed, her breathing rapid. Beth reached for her arm, trying to gently pull her back down, but Claire pulled away. The judge looked up, surprised. "Young lady, please sit down. This is not an appropriate time for interruptions." But Claire didn't sit down. Instead, she took a step forward, her voice shaking but clear as she said, "Your Honor, I have something to say. I need to say something about my mother." The courtroom seemed to freeze. Every eye turned to Claire as she stood there, her chest rising and falling with quick breaths, her hands trembling but her stance firm. I felt my heart lurch into my throat, a mixture of panic and pride flooding through me. This was not part of the plan. This was not supposed to happen. Judge Harrison removed his reading glasses and looked at Claire with a mixture of surprise and curiosity. His voice was stern but not unkind as he said, "Young lady, I understand emotions are running high, but this is a legal proceeding. Unless you're called as a witness, you cannot simply speak whenever you choose." Patricia stood up quickly, her mind clearly racing through the implications. "Your Honor, if I may, this is the couple's daughter, Claire Mitchell. She's 17 years old and has been present throughout these proceedings. While unconventional, Washington law does allow children of sufficient age to provide input in divorce proceedings if they wish to do so." Gordon immediately objected. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The child hasn't been prepared, hasn't been sworn in. And frankly, this seems like an emotional outburst rather than relevant testimony. We object to any unscheduled statements." I watched Mitchell's face drain of color. For the first time since we had entered the courtroom, he looked uncertain, almost afraid. He leaned toward Gordon and whispered something urgently, but Gordon waved him off, focused on the judge's response. Judge Harrison was silent for a moment, studying Claire with an appraising look. Finally he sighed and said, "Miss Mitchell, approach the bench." He gestured to the witness stand. "If you have something relevant to say regarding this proceeding, you may do so. But I warn you, this is a serious matter, and anything you say will be considered as part of the official record. Do you understand?" Claire nodded, her voice steady as she said, "Yes, Your Honor. I understand." Beth tried one more time to stop her, reaching out with a pleading look, but Claire gently squeezed her aunt's hand and pulled away. She walked down the aisle between the rows of seats, her footsteps echoing in the silent courtroom. The rain outside had softened to a steady drizzle, and weak afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting everything in shades of gray. As Claire passed Mitchell's table, he reached out toward her. "Claire, honey, you don't have to do this. Come sit down. This is between your mother and me." Claire stopped and looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw her eyes harden in a way that reminded me so much of my own pain. "No, Dad," she said quietly. "This isn't just between you and Mom. This is about our family, about what you're doing to our family." She continued to the witness stand, and the bailiff approached to swear her in. Claire placed her hand on the Bible, her voice clear and unwavering as she promised to tell the truth. When she sat down, she looked so small in that chair, so young, but there was a strength in her posture that made her seem older than her 17 years. Judge Harrison leaned forward. "Miss Mitchell, please tell us why you felt it necessary to interrupt these proceedings." Claire took a deep breath, her hands gripping the armrests of the chair. When she spoke, her voice carried across the courtroom with surprising force. "I had to speak up because I can't sit here and listen to my father say that my mother doesn't deserve anything. Because it's not true. It's so far from the truth that I feel sick hearing it." Mitchell shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Gordon leaned over and whispered something to him, probably advising him to stay quiet, to let this play out. Patricia sat perfectly still beside me, her hand finding mine under the table and squeezing gently. Claire continued, her words coming faster now, as if a dam had broken inside her. "My whole life, my mom has been there. Every single day. When I was 6 and broke my arm falling off my bike, Dad was at a conference in San Francisco. Mom sat with me in the emergency room for 5 hours, holding my other hand, telling me stories to keep me from being scared. When I had nightmares, it was Mom who came to my room, not because Dad didn't care, but because he was always too tired from work." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed through. "When I was in middle school and got bullied so badly that I didn't want to go to school anymore, Mom was the one who met with the teachers, who found me a counselor, who sat up with me at night when I cried. Dad knew it was happening, but he said he trusted Mom to handle it because he had a big project at work." I felt tears streaming down my face now, unable to stop them. These were memories I had almost forgotten, moments that had felt so normal at the time, just part of being a mother. But hearing Claire recount them, seeing how much they had meant to her, broke something open inside me. Claire wiped at her own eyes but kept going. "When I wanted to try out for the soccer team in 9th grade, Mom drove me to practice every single day, even though the field was 40 minutes away from our house. She sat in the car and worked on her laptop or read, or just waited, for 2 hours every afternoon. Dad came to maybe 3 games that whole season. Mom came to every single one, even the ones in the pouring rain, even the one where I didn't even get to play." Judge Harrison was listening intently now, his expression softened. Even Gordon had stopped shuffling his papers, caught by the raw emotion in Claire's testimony. "Last year, when I was studying for the SATs, I was so stressed that I couldn't sleep. I was having panic attacks. Mom spent weeks helping me study, making flashcards, quizzing me, researching techniques to manage test anxiety. She took me to practice tests on Saturday mornings. She made sure I ate breakfast, got enough sleep, stayed healthy. Dad asked about my scores after I took the test, but he wasn't there for any of the preparation. He didn't see the work that went into it." Claire's voice grew stronger, more certain. "My mom gave up her career for our family. She had a degree in graphic design from the University of Washington. She was working at a marketing firm when she got pregnant with me, and she was really good at it. Her boss wanted to promote her, but she and Dad decided together that it would be better for our family if she stayed home with me, at least while I was young." She looked directly at Mitchell now, her eyes blazing. "Dad, you told her that. You said it made more sense because your salary was higher, because your career had more growth potential. You said you wanted her home with me, that it was important to you. She didn't just decide that on her own. You both decided it together. Mitchell looked away, unable to meet his daughter's gaze. His face had gone red, and I could see his hands clenched into fists on the table. Claire turned back to the judge. Mom tried to keep working part-time from home. She did freelance design work, but it was hard because she had to work around my schedule, around Dad's schedule, around everything else. And whenever there was a conflict, whenever someone had to sacrifice something, it was always Mom. Always. She paused, swallowing hard. When I was in 5th grade, Mom got offered a really good contract with a company downtown. It would have meant going into an office 3 days a week. She was so excited. But that same week, Dad got promoted, and his new position meant more travel, longer hours. They had a fight about it. I wasn't supposed to hear, but I did. Dad said he couldn't take on more at home because of his new responsibilities. He said Mom's opportunity was great, but the timing was wrong. He promised it would be temporary, that once he was settled in his new role, she could pursue her career more seriously. Claire's laugh was bitter, humorless. That was 7 years ago. It was never the right time. There was always another promotion, another project, another reason why Dad's career had to come first, and Mom had to be the one to hold everything else together. I closed my eyes, remembering that fight, remembering how I had convinced myself that Mitchell was right, that we had to prioritize his career for the good of the family. I had believed him when he said it was temporary, that my time would come. But it never had. Mom kept trying, Claire said, her voice softer now. She took online courses to keep her skills current. She volunteered to do design work for my school, for local nonprofits, anything to keep her resume active. But it wasn't the same as having a real career. And now, Dad acts like she was just sitting at home doing nothing all these years. Judge Harrison spoke gently. Miss Mitchell, I appreciate your perspective on your mother's contributions to the household. But this court needs to focus on the legal and financial aspects of the divorce. Is there something specific you wanted to address regarding the property settlement or support arrangements? Claire nodded firmly. Yes, Your Honor. There is. Dad's lawyer said Mom should only get minimal support and 20% of the assets. But that's not fair. Mom gave up 15 years of career advancement. If she had kept working at that marketing firm, if she had gotten that promotion, if she had been able to focus on her career the way Dad focused on his, she would be making good money now too. She would have her own retirement savings, her own financial security. She leaned forward, her voice passionate. Mom didn't fail to build a career because she was lazy or incapable. She didn't do it because she and Dad agreed that someone needed to focus on raising me, on managing our home, on supporting Dad's career. That was valuable work. That had worth. Just because she wasn't getting a paycheck doesn't mean she wasn't contributing to our family's success. Patricia was nodding beside me, clearly pleased with Claire's argument. Gordon looked less comfortable now, exchanging glances with Mitchell. Claire wasn't done, and there's something else. Something I think the court should know about why my parents are getting divorced. She hesitated, and I felt a surge of panic. I didn't want her to have to say it, to have to acknowledge what her father had done. Claire, I said softly, unable to help myself. You don't have to. She looked at me, her eyes filled with love and determination. Yes, I do, Mom. I have to. She turned back to the judge. My parents aren't getting divorced because they grew apart or because of irreconcilable differences. They're getting divorced because my dad had an affair. He cheated on my mom with someone from his work. The courtroom felt even more silent, if that was possible. Gordon started to object, but Judge Harrison held up a hand to stop him. Claire's voice shook with emotion. I know Washington is a no-fault state. I know that legally it doesn't matter why they're getting divorced. But morally it matters. It matters that my dad broke his vows. It matters that while my mom was at home being faithful, being dedicated, keeping her family running, my dad was with someone else. Tears were streaming down her face freely now, but she didn't stop. My mom didn't deserve that. She didn't deserve to be betrayed like that. And she doesn't deserve to be punished for it now by being told she gets almost nothing from the marriage she spent 15 years investing in. Mitchell finally spoke, his voice hoarse. "Claire, please. You don't understand. This is complicated. Your mother and I. We just weren't right for each other anymore. I never meant to hurt anyone." Claire turned to look at her father, and the disappointment in her face was devastating. "You did hurt people, Dad. You hurt Mom. And you hurt me. I trusted you. I looked up to you my whole life. And then I found out that you were lying to us for over a year. That you were building a whole separate life while pretending everything was normal at home." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Mom found out about the affair 6 months ago, but I found out about it before she did. I saw a text message on your phone by accident when you left it on the kitchen counter. I didn't tell Mom right away because I didn't know what to do, because I was scared of what it would mean for our family. But I should have. I should have told her sooner, so she wouldn't have wasted more time believing in you." Mitchell looked stricken. "Claire, I didn't know you knew. I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to find out like that." "You never wanted me to find out at all," Claire shot back. "You wanted to keep lying. And now you want to act like Mom is the problem, like she's some kind of burden you need to get rid of as cheaply as possible. Well, I won't let you do that. I won't sit here and let you treat her like she doesn't matter." Judge Harrison intervened gently. "Miss Mitchell, I understand you're upset, and your loyalty to your mother is clear. But this court needs to make decisions based on legal grounds, not on emotional reactions to marital problems." Claire straightened in her chair, her voice becoming more controlled, more mature. "I understand that, Your Honor, but there are legal grounds too. My mom is 40 years old, and she hasn't had a full-time job in over 15 years because of decisions she and my dad made together for the benefit of their family. It's going to be really hard for her to find a job that pays enough to support herself, especially in Seattle where the cost of living is so high." She took a breath and continued. "The house on Maple Street, my childhood home, is in both their names. They bought it together. They paid the mortgage together, even if Dad's paycheck was bigger. But it was Mom who turned that house into a home. It was Mom who painted the walls, who planted the garden, who fixed things when they broke, who made it a place where I felt safe and loved." Patricia was taking notes furiously now, clearly seeing value in Claire's testimony that could support her case. "Dad makes over $200,000 a year now," Claire continued. "Mom makes maybe $15,000 from her part-time freelance work, and that's in a good year. If she only gets minimal support for 2 years and 20% of the assets, she'll struggle. She'll have to find a cheap apartment, probably far from Seattle because she won't be able to afford anything close by. She'll have to take whatever job she can get, even if it doesn't use her skills or pay well." Her voice broke again. "My mom deserves better than that. She deserves to have financial security after everything she gave up for our family. She deserves to be able to rebuild her life without being desperate and scared all the time." Judge Harrison was listening carefully, his expression thoughtful. "Miss Mitchell, you've made your feelings very clear. Is there anything else you want to add?" Claire nodded, tears still streaming down her face. "Just one more thing. Your Honor, when I turn 18 in 6 months, I get to choose where I live and who I spend time with. I want the court to know that I plan to live with my mom, not my dad. Not because I don't love my dad, but because I can't respect what he's done. I can't pretend that cheating on my mom and then trying to leave her with almost nothing is okay." She looked at Mitchell one last time. "I'm disappointed in you, Dad. I'm so disappointed. You taught me to work hard, to be honest, to treat people fairly. But you didn't do any of those things in your marriage. And now I have to figure out how to reconcile the dad I thought I knew with the person you actually are." With that, Claire stood up from the witness stand. The bailiff reminded her she hadn't been dismissed, but Judge Harrison waved his hand. "Let her go. I think we've all heard enough for now." Claire walked back to her seat next to Beth, who immediately pulled her into a tight hug. I could see my sister's shoulders shaking as she cried, holding my daughter close. The courtroom remained silent for a long moment. Finally, Judge Harrison cleared his throat and addressed both attorneys. I'm going to call a 30-minute recess. Both parties and their counsel should use this time to consider what we've just heard. When we return, I want to hear revised proposals that take into account the testimony we've received today. He looked directly at Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, your daughter has given us a perspective on this marriage that I found quite compelling. I suggest you and your attorney give serious thought to what a fair settlement actually looks like, given the circumstances she described. With a bang of his gavel, Judge Harrison stood and left the courtroom. As soon as the door closed behind him, the room erupted in quiet conversations. Patricia turned to me, her eyes bright with something that looked like hope. That was extraordinary, she whispered. Your daughter just changed the entire trajectory of this case. But I'd barely heard her. I was already moving, pushing back from the table and rushing to the gallery where Claire sat, still wrapped in Beth's arms. When I reached them, Claire looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. Did I do okay, Mom? She asked, her voice small and uncertain, so different from the strong, clear voice that had filled the courtroom moments ago. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight, feeling her body shake with sobs. You did more than okay, sweetheart. You were amazing. You were so brave and so strong. But you didn't have to do that. You didn't have to put yourself through that for me. Claire pulled back to look at me, her face wet with tears. Yes, I did. I couldn't let him say you don't deserve anything. You deserve everything, Mom. You deserve the world. The rain had stopped by the time we stepped out of the courthouse 3 hours later. The Seattle streets were slick and shining, reflecting the amber glow of streetlights as evening settled over the city. The air was cold and crisp, carrying the scent of wet pavement and the distant smell of coffee from the nearby shops on 3rd Avenue. People hurried past us, commuters heading home, their faces buried in their phones or hidden under umbrellas, oblivious to the fact that my entire life had just shifted on its axis. Patricia walked beside me, her briefcase in one hand and a folder of documents in the other. Claire was on my other side, her hand tucked into mine like she used to do when she was small. Beth followed behind us, talking quietly on her phone with her husband, telling him we were on our way. After the recess, everything had changed. Mitchell's entire demeanor had shifted when we returned to the courtroom. He looked smaller, somehow deflated, like Claire's words had punctured something essential inside him. Gordon had pulled him aside during the break, and I watched them have what appeared to be a heated discussion in the corner of the hallway. Mitchell kept shaking his head, running his hands through his hair, while Gordon spoke to him with sharp gestures and an increasingly frustrated expression. When we reconvened, Gordon presented a revised settlement offer. The change was dramatic. Instead of minimal support and 20% of assets, Mitchell was now offering 50% of all marital assets, including the house. He was proposing spousal support of $4,000 a month for 5 years, with the possibility of extension if I couldn't establish sufficient income by then. He was also agreeing to pay for Claire's college education in full, as well as covering her health insurance until she was 26. Patricia had remained calm and professional, but I could see the satisfaction in her eyes as she reviewed the terms. She negotiated a few additional points, including Mitchell covering the costs of career counseling and job training for me, acknowledging that I would need support to re-enter the workforce after so many years away. She also secured an agreement that Mitchell would pay all the legal fees for the divorce, both his and mine. Judge Harrison had reviewed the revised settlement carefully, asking me several questions to ensure I understood the terms and agreed to them. When I confirmed that I did, he looked at Mitchell and said something I would never forget. Mr. Mitchell, your daughter showed more maturity and character in this courtroom today than many adults I see. I hope you take time to reflect on the example she set and consider what kind of father and what kind of man you want to be going forward. Mitchell had nodded, his face flushed with embarrassment, unable to meet anyone's eyes. The judge had signed the preliminary agreement, setting a final court date for 30 days out to make the divorce official. And just like that, after months of fighting and bitterness, it was essentially over. Now, as we walked to Patricia's car in the parking garage, I felt strange. Not exactly happy, but not sad either. It was more like relief mixed with exhaustion, like I had been holding my breath underwater for months and could finally come up for air. The settlement was fair, more than fair. It would give me the stability I needed to rebuild my life. But it didn't erase the pain of the past year, or the 15 years before that now felt tainted by Mitchell's betrayal. Patricia loaded her briefcase into her silver sedan and turned to me with a warm smile. I have to say, in 25 years of practicing family law, I've never seen anything quite like what happened in that courtroom today. Your daughter is remarkable, Jennifer. I squeezed Claire's hand. She is. She really is. Patricia's expression grew more serious. The settlement we secured is very good, all things considered. But I want you to be realistic about what comes next. Rebuilding your career after 15 years won't be easy. The job market has changed dramatically, especially in graphic design. You'll need to update your skills, rebuild your portfolio, network extensively. It's going to take time and effort. I know, I said, and I meant it. During those long, dark months after discovering Mitchell's affair, I had done a lot of thinking about what I wanted my life to look like moving forward. I had been scared, terrified actually, of being alone and having to support myself after depending on Mitchell for so long. But I had also felt something else, a tiny spark of possibility, a chance to rediscover who I was outside of being Mitchell's wife and Claire's mother. But I'm ready, I continued. I'm ready to work hard and build something that's mine. I'm ready to stop making myself small to fit into someone else's life. Patricia smiled and gave me a quick hug. Good. That's exactly the attitude you need. Call me if you need anything before the final court date. And Jennifer, don't forget to take care of yourself through this transition. It's going to be emotional, even with a fair settlement. We said goodbye, and Patricia drove away, her taillights disappearing into the evening traffic. Beth came up beside me and wrapped her arm around my shoulders. What do you say we get some dinner? My treat. We can go to that Italian place on Capitol Hill you like. Claire nodded eagerly. Please, Mom? I'm starving. I was too nervous to eat lunch. I started to agree when I saw him. Mitchell, standing near his car on the other side of the parking garage. He was alone. Gordon had apparently left already. He was just standing there, watching us, his hands in his pockets, his shoulders slumped. When our eyes met, he raised one hand in a small, tentative wave. Beth followed my gaze, and her expression hardened. Let's go. You don't owe him anything, Jen. Especially not today. But Claire had seen him too. She pulled away from me, and before I could stop her, she was walking toward her father. My heart clenched watching her cross the distance between us, her steps slow but deliberate. Beth started to go after her, but I held her back. Let her, I said softly. She needs this. We watched as Claire stopped a few feet away from Mitchell. Even from this distance, I could see the tension in both their bodies, the careful space they maintained between them. Mitchell said something, and Claire shook her head. Then she spoke, and though I couldn't hear her words, I could see the pain in Mitchell's face as he listened. The conversation lasted only a few minutes before Claire turned and walked back to us. Her face was composed, but I could see fresh tears threatening to spill over. When she reached us, Beth immediately pulled her close. What did you say to him? I asked gently. Claire took a shaky breath. I told him I love him, but I also told him that love isn't enough right now, that he broke something between us that's going to take a long time to fix if it can be fixed at all. I told him I need space and that I won't be coming to visit him for a while. I looked back at Mitchell. He was still standing there, frozen, looking more lost and broken than I had ever seen him. Part of me, the part that had loved him for 15 years, wanted to feel sorry for him. But a stronger part, the part that was learning to value myself, felt nothing but a quiet sense of justice. "Let's go," I said, guiding Claire and Beth toward our car. "Let's go have that dinner." The Italian restaurant was warm and crowded, filled with the sounds of conversation and laughter, the smell of garlic and fresh bread. We found a corner booth and settled in, the three of us squeezed together on the worn leather seats. Beth ordered a bottle of wine for us and a soda for Claire, despite Claire's protest that she was almost 18 and should be allowed wine to celebrate. "Celebrate what?" Beth asked with a raised eyebrow. "Your mother's divorce?" "No," Claire said seriously. "Celebrate Mom standing up for herself. Celebrate getting justice. Celebrate new beginnings." Beth and I exchanged glances, and then Beth laughed, the sound breaking some of the tension that had been wrapped around us all day. "Okay, you make a good point, but you're still getting soda." We ordered food, more than we could possibly eat, and as we waited, Beth raised her wine glass. "To my sister, the strongest woman I know, and to my niece, who proved today that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree." I raised my glass, feeling emotion thicken my throat. "To family, to the people who stand by you when everything falls apart." Claire raised her soda glass. "To Mom, for teaching me that being kind doesn't mean letting people walk all over you, and for showing me what real strength looks like." We clinked our glasses together, and for the first time in months, I felt something that resembled peace. Not happiness, not yet, but something close to it. A sense that maybe, just maybe, I was going to be okay. Over dinner, we talked about practical things. Beth and her husband, Craig, had a guest room in their house in Ballard, and they insisted I stay there until I figured out my living situation. The house on Maple Street held too many memories, and the idea of staying there alone, surrounded by ghosts of my failed marriage, was unbearable. "You can stay as long as you need," Beth said firmly. "Craig already cleared it with me. He said the house is too quiet anyway since the boys went off to college." Claire pushed her pasta around her plate. "I want to stay with you too, Mom. At Aunt Beth's. I don't want to go back to the house either, at least not right now." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Sweetheart, that house is your home. All your things are there, your room, your memories. You shouldn't have to leave because of what your dad did." "It doesn't feel like home anymore," Claire said quietly. "Not without you there. Not knowing what happened there. I'd rather be with you, even if it means sleeping on Aunt Beth's couch." Beth interjected quickly. "You won't be sleeping on the couch. The guest room has a queen bed, plenty big enough for both of you, and there's a pull-out sofa in the den if you want your own space sometimes." I felt tears prick my eyes again, but these were different tears. Grateful tears. "Thank you, Beth, for everything. I don't know what I would have done without you these past months." Beth waved her hand dismissively, but her eyes were bright with emotion. "That's what sisters are for. You were there for me when Craig lost his job 5 years ago, remember? You let us stay with you and Mitchell for 3 months until he found something new. This is just me returning the favor." We finished our meal and ordered tiramisu to share, the rich coffee flavor and creamy texture a small indulgence that felt earned. As we ate, I found myself thinking about the future in a way I hadn't allowed myself to before. It felt too scary, too uncertain. But now, with the settlement secured, with my sister's support, with Claire's fierce loyalty, the future seemed less frightening and more like a blank canvas. "I think I want to take some classes," I said suddenly. Patricia mentioned updating my skills. I've been thinking about it. Graphic design has changed so much since I was working. Everything is digital now, all these new programs and techniques. I need to catch up. Beth nodded enthusiastically. Seattle Central College has great certificate programs. Short-term, affordable, practical. You could probably finish in 6 months to a year. Claire was looking at her phone, scrolling rapidly. "Mom, look at this. The University of Washington has a continuing education program specifically for people returning to the workforce. They have courses in digital design, social media marketing, web development, and they have career counseling included. She turned her phone to show me the website, her excitement evident. Seeing her like this, hopeful and forward-looking instead of hurt and angry, made my heart swell. She had been through so much these past months, had witnessed the ugly dissolution of her parents' marriage, had lost the image of her father she had held her whole life. Yet here she was helping me plan for the future, showing a resilience that amazed me. "That looks perfect," I said, studying the course descriptions. "I'll call them tomorrow and get more information." The drive back to Beth's house took us through downtown Seattle, the city lights reflecting off the still, wet streets. The Space Needle glowed in the distance, a constant landmark in the ever-changing skyline. I had lived in this city my entire adult life, had built my marriage here, raised my daughter here. But tonight, looking at it through the car window, it felt different. It felt like a city full of possibilities rather than a city full of memories I wanted to escape. Beth's house was a charming craftsman-style home in a quiet neighborhood near Golden Gardens Park. The front porch light was on, and I could see Craig through the window, waiting up for us. He came out as soon as we pulled into the driveway, a tall man with graying hair and a warm smile. "How did it go?" he asked, pulling me into a hug. "Better than expected," I said. "Thanks to Claire." Craig looked at his niece with pride. "Beth texted me some of what happened. I'm proud of you, kiddo. That took guts." Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and coffee. Craig had made up the guest room with fresh sheets and had even put flowers on the nightstand, yellow daisies that brightened the whole room. My throat tightened at the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "I'm going to take a shower and go to bed," Claire announced, grabbing her overnight bag. "Today was exhausting." I kissed her forehead. "Good night, sweetheart. Thank you again for what you did today. I'm so proud of you." She hugged me tight. "I'm proud of you too, Mom, for not giving up, for fighting for what you deserve." After Claire disappeared into the bathroom, I sat down on the couch with Beth and Craig, finally allowing myself to fully process everything that had happened. Craig poured me a cup of tea, and we sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sound the ticking of the old clock on the mantel. "So what now?" Craig asked finally, "What's the first step in this new chapter?" I thought about that for a moment. Honestly, I think the first step is figuring out who I am outside of being Mitchell's wife. I've been defined by that relationship for so long, I'm not sure I remember who Jennifer really is. Beth smiled. "I remember. She's the girl who drove across the country with me the summer after high school graduation in that terrible van we bought for $500. She's the woman who learned to surf at 32 because she decided life was too short not to try new things. She's my sister who has always been braver and stronger than she gives herself credit for." Tears slipped down my cheeks. I don't feel brave or strong. I feel scared and tired and like I'm starting over from zero. "That's exactly when you need to be brave and strong," Craig said gently. "When things are easy, anyone can coast. But when everything falls apart and you choose to rebuild anyway, that's when you find out what you're really made of." We talked for another hour, making plans, discussing practicalities, but also dreaming about possibilities. By the time I finally went to bed, it was past midnight. Claire was already asleep, her breathing deep and even. I slipped under the covers beside her, careful not to wake her, and stared at the ceiling. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. Against my better judgment, I looked at it. A text from Mitchell. "I'm sorry. For everything. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know I'm sorry. Tell Claire I love her. Tell her I'll wait as long as it takes for her to be ready to talk to me again." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling a complex tangle of emotions. Anger, sadness, grief for what we had lost, and underneath it all, a tiny, barely acknowledged sense of relief. Relief that it was over. Relief that I no longer had to pretend everything was okay. Relief that I could finally start building a life that was authentically mine. I didn't respond to the message. Instead, I turned off my phone and closed my eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new uncertainties. But for tonight, I was safe, I was supported, and I was free. That was enough. 6 months had passed since that day in the courthouse, and Seattle was in the full bloom of spring. Cherry blossoms lined the streets near the University District, their petals drifting through the air like pink snow. The city had shed its gray winter coat and emerged vibrant and alive, full of color and possibility. I felt like I had done the same. I sat at a small desk in the corner of what had been Beth and Craig's den, but had become my temporary workspace. My laptop was open in front of me, displaying the website I had been working on for the past 2 weeks. It was a portfolio site, clean and modern, showcasing the design work I had been creating in my classes at UW's continuing education program. The past 6 months had been harder than I expected in some ways, but also surprisingly rewarding. I had thrown myself into my coursework, staying up late to learn new software programs, watching endless tutorials on YouTube, rebuilding skills that had grown rusty, and learning new ones that hadn't existed when I had last worked professionally. My instructor, a woman named Diane Porter who ran her own successful design firm downtown, had taken an interest in my work. She was in her 50s, with short silver hair and an infectious enthusiasm for design. She had been especially encouraging, telling me that my years away from the field gave me a different perspective, a maturity in my design choices that many younger designers lacked. "You understand people," she had told me after reviewing one of my projects. "You understand what makes them feel comfortable, what draws their eye, what creates an emotional connection. That's not something you can teach. That comes from life experience." I was 2 months away from completing my certificate program, and I had already started sending out resumes and doing informational interviews. The job market was competitive, just as Patricia had warned, but I was persistent. I had learned that I was capable of more than I had given myself credit for. The house on Maple Street had sold 3 weeks ago. Mitchell and I had split the proceeds 50-50, as agreed in the settlement. My portion had been deposited into a new bank account, one with only my name on it, and seeing that balance had been surreal. For the first time in my adult life, I had financial resources that were entirely my own. I was using part of the money to look for an apartment. Beth and Craig had been wonderful hosts, insisting I could stay as long as I needed, but I was ready for my own space. I had been looking at places near the University District, small one-bedrooms that were affordable, but still in a neighborhood I loved. Tomorrow I had appointments to view 3 different apartments, and I was excited about the prospect of having a place that was entirely mine to decorate, to arrange, to make into a home. Claire was thriving too. She had been accepted to the University of Washington for the fall, planning to study psychology. She had decided she wanted to understand what drove people's behavior, what made relationships work or fall apart. I suspected her own experiences had influenced that choice, but if it gave her purpose and direction, I was supportive. Her relationship with Mitchell was slowly improving, though it remained strained. She had started having lunch with him once every 2 weeks, carefully structured meetings in public places where they talked about surface things but avoided the deeper wounds that still needed time to heal. Mitchell was trying, I could see that. He had ended his relationship with Vanessa shortly after the divorce proceedings began. Though whether that was out of genuine remorse or simply practical necessity, I wasn't sure. He had also started therapy, something Claire had mentioned to me. He said he needed to work on himself, she had told me last week, to figure out why he made the choices he made. I don't know if it will change anything, but at least he's trying. I didn't know how to feel about Mitchell's attempts at self-improvement. Part of me was glad for Claire's sake, hoping that she could eventually rebuild a healthy relationship with her father. But another part of me, the part that still sometimes woke up at night feeling the ache of betrayal, felt cynical about whether people really changed or just learned to hide their true selves better. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Diane from my design program. I answered quickly, surprised to hear from her outside of class hours. Jennifer, hi. Diane's voice was warm and slightly rushed. I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I have something I wanted to discuss with you. Not at all, I said, closing my laptop to give her my full attention. What's up? I've been following your progress in the program, and I'm really impressed with your work. You have a natural eye for layout and a strong understanding of branding. I was wondering if you might be interested in an internship opportunity at my firm. I sat up straighter, my heart starting to beat faster. An internship? I know the word internship usually implies unpaid or low-paid work for recent graduates, Diane said quickly. But this would be a paid position, 20 hours a week, with the possibility of converting to full-time after you complete your certificate. We have a small team, just 5 people, but we work with some great clients. Tech startups, nonprofits, a few established local businesses. I think you'd be a good fit. My mind raced. This was exactly the kind of opportunity one had been hoping for, but hadn't expected to find so soon. Diane, that sounds amazing. I'd absolutely be interested. When would you need me to start? We're flexible, ideally within the next 2 weeks, but we can work around your class schedule. Why don't you come by the office tomorrow afternoon? I can show you around, introduce you to the team, and we can discuss details. After we hung up, I sat in stunned silence for a moment, then let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. An actual job offer in my field, working with a woman I respected. It felt like a dream, like validation that all the hard work and uncertainty was actually leading somewhere. I heard the front door open and Claire's voice calling out, "Mom, I'm home." She appeared in the doorway of the den, dropping her backpack on the floor. She had just come from her part-time job at a bookstore near campus, work she had taken on to save money for college expenses and to gain some independence. "You look weird," she said, studying my face. "Good weird, though. Did something happen?" I told her about Diane's call, and Claire's face lit up with excitement. She rushed over and hugged me, nearly knocking over my coffee mug in the process. "Mom, that's incredible. See, I told you someone would recognize how talented you are." "It's just an internship," I cautioned, not wanting to get too excited yet. "And it's only part-time." "It's a foot in the door," Claire countered. "And Diane owns the firm, right? So if she's personally offering you a position, that means she sees real potential. This is huge, Mom." Her enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself grinning. "Okay, yes, it's pretty huge. I can't believe this is actually happening." Beth came home an hour later and insisted we celebrate. She ordered pizza from our favorite place, the one with the thin crust and the incredible garlic knots. And Craig picked up a cake from the bakery on the corner that simply said, "Congratulations, Jennifer," in blue frosting. As we ate, surrounded by people who loved me and supported me, I felt a sense of completeness I hadn't experienced in a long time. Not the completeness that comes from being part of a couple, from defining yourself through your relationship to another person, but the completeness that comes from knowing yourself, from building something that is yours alone. "Speech," Beth demanded, raising her glass of wine. "You need to give a speech." I laughed. "I don't have a speech prepared." "Make one up," Craig said with a smile. "Tell us how you're feeling." I stood up, suddenly feeling emotional. "Okay, 6 months ago, I was sitting in a courtroom listening to the man I had loved for 15 years tell a judge that I didn't deserve anything. And I believed him. I believed that I had wasted my life, that I had nothing to show for 15 years of marriage except a failed relationship and a resume with a giant gap in it. Claire reached for my hand, and I squeezed it gently before continuing. But then my daughter stood up and reminded everyone, that my life had value, that the work I had done, the sacrifices I had made, the love I had given, all of it mattered. She reminded me that I deserved to be treated with respect and fairness. Tears were rolling down my cheeks now, but I didn't care. These past 6 months have been scary and hard and lonely sometimes. but they've also been empowering. I've learned that I'm stronger than I thought I was. I've learned that it's never too late to start over, to rebuild, to chase dreams that you put on hold. I've learned that my value doesn't come from being someone's wife or from sacrificing myself for others, but from who I am as a person. I looked at each of them, and I've learned that family isn't just about blood or marriage certificates. It's about the people who stand beside you when everything falls apart. The people who believe in you when you've forgotten how to believe in yourself. So thank you, all of you, for being my family when I needed it most. We clinked our glasses together, and for a while we just sat there, eating cake and talking about the future. Claire shared her excitement about college, about the psychology courses she wanted to take. Beth talked about the vacation she and Craig were planning to take to Hawaii in the fall, their first trip in years now that their own sons were independent. Craig told a funny story about something that had happened at his work. It was normal, mundane even, but it felt precious to me. These ordinary moments, these simple pleasures, the sense of being grounded and supported. This was what I had been missing in my marriage, I realized. Not grand gestures or expensive gifts, but this feeling of being truly seen, truly valued, truly home. Later that night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat alone in the den with my laptop. I opened my email and found myself staring at the unread messages in my inbox. One of them was from Mitchell, sent earlier that day. I had been avoiding his emails, letting them pile up unread, not ready to engage with him beyond the practical necessities of finalizing the divorce. But tonight, feeling strong and centered and hopeful, I clicked it open. The message was short. Jennifer, I know you probably won't read this, but I need to say it anyway. I was wrong. About everything. You did deserve so much more than I gave you. More than I was capable of giving. Watching Claire testify in that courtroom, hearing her describe all the things you did for our family that I barely noticed, made me realize how blind I had been. I took you for granted. I treated you like you were invisible, like your contributions didn't matter because they didn't come with a paycheck. I was selfish and cruel, and I destroyed the best thing in my life. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I can forgive myself. But I wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what I lost. And I'm sorry. I'm so deeply sorry. I read the message 3 times, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. There was still anger there, still hurt, still grief for the years I had given to a man who hadn't valued them. But there was also something new, a sense of closure, perhaps. An acknowledgement that my pain was real and my anger justified. I didn't respond to the email. Maybe someday I would, when enough time had passed and the wounds had healed more completely. But for now, it was enough to know that he understood what he had done, that he recognized the harm he had caused. It didn't undo the damage, but it validated my experience in a way that felt important. I closed my laptop and looked around the den, at the space I had carved out for myself in my sister's home. Soon I would have my own apartment, my own space to arrange and decorate. I would have my internship, my first step back into a professional career. I would have my independence, my autonomy, my life shaped by my own choices rather than molded to fit someone else's needs. The divorce would be final in 2 weeks. Judge Harrison had set the date, and Patricia had assured me it would be a formality. Just a brief court appearance to officially dissolve the marriage. I wasn't sure how I would feel that day, watching 15 years of my life be legally erased with the stroke of a pen. But I knew I would face it the same way I had faced everything else these past months, with Claire by my side and with a determination to keep moving forward. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Even though she was just upstairs in the guest room, she apparently couldn't sleep either. Mom, I'm proud of you. Not just for the job offer, but for everything. For not giving up. For showing me what resilience looks like. I love you. I typed back quickly, my heart full. I love you too, sweetheart. More than you could ever know. Thank you for being my rock through all of this. Thank you for reminding me who I am when I had forgotten. The next morning, I woke early and went for a run along the Burke-Gilman Trail. The trail was busy with morning commuters on bikes and other runners, everyone taking advantage of the beautiful spring weather. The sun was just rising, casting everything in a golden light, and the air smelled fresh and clean. As I ran, my feet hitting the pavement in a steady rhythm, I thought about the journey I had been on. 6 months ago, I had felt like my life was ending. My marriage was over, my identity was shattered, my future was terrifying and uncertain. I had felt worthless, discarded, invisible. But I wasn't invisible. I was right here, breathing hard as I pushed myself up a hill, feeling the burn in my muscles and the strength in my body. I was real and solid and valuable, not because of who I was married to or what sacrifices I had made for others, but because of who I was choosing to become. I thought about the internship, about the apartments I would see today, about the final court date in 2 weeks. I thought about Claire heading off to college in the fall, about the empty nest years that lay ahead. Once upon a time, that prospect would have terrified me. Without Mitchell, without my daily role as Claire's mother, who would I be? Now, running through Seattle as the city woke up around me, I felt excited rather than scared. I would be Jennifer, just Jennifer, and that was going to be enough. More than enough. It was going to be everything. I finished my run and headed back to Beth's house, where the smell of coffee greeted me at the door. The day stretched ahead, full of possibility. An interview with Diane, apartment viewings, dinner with Claire, maybe a movie later if we weren't too tired. Simple things, ordinary things, but they were my things, my choices, my life. As I poured myself a cup of coffee and looked out the kitchen window at the morning light filtering through the trees, I realized something. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living, really living, maybe for the first time in years. And it felt incredible. The road ahead would still have challenges, I knew that. There would be setbacks and disappointments, lonely nights and moments of doubt. But there would also be victories, small and large. There would be growth and discovery, and the satisfaction of building something that was truly mine. In that courtroom 6 months ago, Mitchell had said I didn't deserve anything. But he was wrong. I deserved everything. I deserved respect and fairness and the chance to build a life on my own terms. I deserved to be valued for who I was, not just for what I could do for others. I deserved happiness and fulfillment and the freedom to chase my own dreams. And thanks to my daughter's courage and my own growing strength, I was finally claiming what I deserved, not with bitterness or revenge, but with hope and determination and a quiet confidence that I could handle whatever came next. The divorce hearing had been a breaking point, the moment when everything I thought I knew about my life fell apart. But it had also been a turning point, the moment when I began to rebuild myself into someone stronger, someone more authentic, someone who understood her own worth. I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to myself, to Claire, to Beth and Craig, to Patricia and Diane, and everyone who had helped me get to this moment. And I toasted to the future, uncertain but bright with possibility, waiting for me to step into it with courage and grace. It was going to be a good day, and tomorrow would be even better. I was sure of it.